Well, again, made it work, but it took some doing.
What happened?
I don't know. I think Zoom did an update, or Zoom's having an issue right now, because I tried it again and it gave me a message that said internal error, which is not my computer. It's outside of my computer. Yep. Yeah, that's
The online it said to clear the cache.
oh yeah. Well, good to go. So took me a yeah. I think I don't know if it was an update or what, but it's up and running. So as long as people get back on, we should be good. I just didn't want to have to change all the links. So,
No.
it's never happened before.
Does everybody else know it's ready?
I sent it to Jake and to Karen, so hopefully they can. Here we go. Here comes Karen now. Oh, that was interesting. It would have to be the when we were getting together with the city council too.
Yeah, I know.
It's always the way it happens, isn't it?
That's it. We are live on the web right now, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I got it working, so I didn't dare shut it off.
I understand that.
I shared that along, Dave, so everyone knows.
Don't know why, but we are live right now, Alicia, just so you know. I'm just letting people know we're live on the web right now, just so you know. Dennis, just so you know, we're live on the web. I got to go on, so I didn't dare turn us off. So we're live. Megan, we're live on the web. So when you are ready to go, when everybody's back in, you can go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you.
Hello. Yep.
Lee. Okay, there you go. Zach, we've had some technical issues, so you're not late for the meeting.
I was worried. I was like, I could see everybody, but I can't hear anything.
I told you I'd take care of it, Zach, for you. So the tech guy worked his magic.
Nice.
So on the council side, I think the only one we're missing at this point is Councilor Khalid.
We said 6:30 before we got off, so I'm wondering if they haven't logged back in yet because of that. Oh, but my time is always slow, so it probably already is 6:30.
Dale, could you try to reach out to her?
We are already live, Dave.
Yep, you're live, ready to go. Sorry for the delay, folks.
That's all right. Oh, and there she is. Okay. So today is Monday, March 22nd, 2021. We will call this joint meeting of the Lewiston School Committee and the Lewiston City Council to order at 6:32 p.m. And we will start with introductions. We will start with Miss Avery and Miss Paquette, and then we will go around by the wards for the City Council, and then introductions by the, School Committee, and then introductions by the City Council, Administration, and then by ward.
Great. Good evening. My name is Bobby Avery. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer.
Good evening. I'm Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent, Lewiston Public Schools.
Stamen, representing Ward 1.
Good evening, Elgin Fiscal Ward 2.
Kiernan Majuras Collins, Ward 3.
Hi there, Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4.
Good evening, Linnea Hawkins, Ward 5.
Ron Potvin, Ward 6.
Paul Beaupont, Ward 7.
Ms. Ray, did you want to introduce yourself now or with City Council?
I'll go with council.
Okay. I'm Megan Parks. I'm the at-large representative.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Dennis Dote, City Administrator.
Heather Hunter, Finance Director.
Dale Doughty, Deputy City Administrator.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Kerr. I'm the mayor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sophia Khalid. I'm representing Ward 1 on the City Council.
Zach Pettingill, representing Ward 2.
Alicia Ray, representing City Council Ward 3 and the City Council representative to the school committee.
Michael LaJoy, Council President, representing Ward 4.
Luke Jensen, Council Ward 5.
Good evening, Lee Clement, representing Ward 6, City Council.
Hi there, Stephanie Gelinas, representing Ward 7, City Council.
All right, thank you. We don't have the Pledge of Allegiance on the agenda, but if everyone's okay with it, I would like to go ahead and do that now. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is the fiscal year 2022 school budget workshop, and Superintendent Langles will present.
Well, good evening, everyone. I have some slides that I'll work through and then entertain any questions you may have. Members of the committee have been working very hard on this, as well as Bobby Avery, who's been our chief financial everything in this roadmap recently, and also working hard, Karen Paquette, our assistant superintendent. So I want to thank them both for their time and their effort. Sorry about that. So some areas that we work to focus on in talking with our district leadership and asking them to gather their budgets. I just want to share a few talking points that this budget as proposed does not meet the needs of our learners. In an effort to plan, we were planning for our most vulnerable today, and we believe that improves our community and our economics and economy in the future. And so we're planning for our most vulnerable. Also, with the pandemic, remediation will be will be a key part of our plan in trying to help students get back to where they need to be. But I would add that the pandemic has polarized some things, but we know that we've had some students that have struggled to grow at times, and we want to work to get better at that. As far as budget approval process goes, we started on March 3rd with the release of our first draft. The school committee will be working toward approving a budget for the 5th of April, back to the city on the 13th of April. City council will then hopefully approve the budget on May 4th with a referendum on May 11th. I don't anticipate that to be delayed this year, so hopefully we can keep that referendum where it should be in the spring. There's just some process history to date. The initial budget with the proposed items from school staff was at $105 million, and we reduced this by over $10 million to create a draft. I shared a draft budget again on that March 3rd date with a 6.99% increase. This increased the local share of estimated $1.41 on the mill rate. Heather may have a more clear picture of that at this point. Parking lot items were reviewed by the school committee last Wednesday as a matter of educational policy, with a number of items that were reinstated for consideration in our next draft. Some additional considerations. I'm looking at relief funds that are currently undesignated. We were deliberate in that effort with the most recent stimulus that is available to us. The 1.9 that was $1 billion package that was, $1.9 trillion package that was approved at the federal level has not made its way to us yet. We don't know what that will look like specifically. We hope to know more information soon. But with undesignated funds, one thing that I would like to do is consider how we can reduce the local tax burden over a 2-year cycle. The fear behind that, or the danger behind that, is a recurring budget item that's covered by relief funds could create a budget shock if the funds expire, or when the funds expire or are spent. Something I learned as a new superintendent, that carryover funds have grown over the years. This is largely due to vacancies, and there's some other reasons, but we have some ideas on how we're going to work to reduce unexpended fund cycles. That's a challenging area. Some key cost drivers, debt service. We have some existing debt service of about $1.3 million, and the Lewiston High School expansion is going to add about $1 million to our debt service next year in FY22. I liken that to essentially a mortgage on the expansion, which was sorely needed and supported by our community and referendum, but we still have to pay the bills. Also, I do believe it's time that we better serve our English language learners. There's some supports that are built into this budget to the tune of $1.2 million to do some work there. That has a wide range from professional development and training through to staffing and different ratios in classrooms and rotations in schedule. And there's some fixed contractual growth that's through salaries, benefits, fringe, what have you. Expansion's going well. This photo is a couple of weeks old. The snow has since melted, but the expansion is going well, and they have the deck on the metal framing, and they're starting to weld the base stubs of the metal framing for the interior partitions. And just beyond the stairwell, which is the rounded piece, about 2/3 of the way to the left of the left picture, the elevator shaft comes up the back side of that, and that will help serve our students and staff much better. So in the binders that were shared with you, underneath tab 1, you can see the debt service at $2.3 million, surplus carry forward of $5.9 million, again, which is something that I feel is high and something that we need to reduce the use of surplus carry forward funds in the future. Miscellaneous $316,000, and the additional local allocation in this draft budget is $2.5 million. And I'm referencing tab 1 in the binders that were shared out with you. One question that keeps coming up for me is, how do these numbers get formed? And I'll spare you long details, but if you want to look in tab 5, I'll answer any questions you have there if you want to look at that further. But the model for school funding determines our allocation from the state subsidy, but they also decide what they call the foundation allocation, or the local share of the state funding model. And this year, the state contribution is slated to be 65.3 million, which is up about 2% or 1.3 million. The local share actually went down by $144,000 according to the state model, and that's that local minimum share that you've probably heard about in the past, where if we don't raise that, we will lose state subsidy funds as well. I'm just going to quickly go through the articles. There are 11 articles. These are how we vote on budgets. It's how the budgets are set up for referendum, but also for our accounting structure with the state. So in Article 1, you have regular instruction, and this includes our day-to-day regular instruction, K-2 programming, and other instructional programs. And this is up 3.2 million, or 11.18%. This is also an area where you'll see some of those language learner resources built in. In Article 2, special education, there's many areas here with special education. This is down slightly, 0.82%, but I want to be upfront with you to let you know that we have reduced some healthcare and fringe costs within our budget across the board. But for budgeting purposes by article, it made sense to extract some of those funds out of Article 2. But again, I want to be upfront that otherwise we would have to go into every line of every employee to extract that. So it's a workbook strategy, not a final number. We did reduce a number of vacancies. Last year we had an Iep audit done, a special ed audit done, and it led to some more information. And there's a lot of thinking out there from that audit that we could reduce some costs in special ed. One of the ways in which we think we might be able to do that is through a good look at our IEPs. And we've initiated a process to do the IEP audit now, so that we have that information sooner than later. And we reduced vacancies. We had to do some corrections on those. We're up over 10 vacancies that were positions that were sitting open that we've reduced. And we're going to work to find ways to fill those gaps if they develop. Article 3 talks about career and technical education. That's essentially LRTC. That's up 6.39%. That's largely due to an exploratory program that the subsidy will cover, essentially one-to-one. It's a $91,000 program that will allow our students to access LRTC at a younger age and some more exploratory programs. So we're excited about that. It doesn't negatively impact the budget. Adult education, they're up 2.65%. It's a very small amount in the grand scheme. They had some staff that were hired on that have chosen to take benefits and health insurance, I should say. And that's the bulk of some of that shift. Article 4 is called other instruction. Things that land there are summer school, co-curricular, extracurricular. And one of the things that I made a decision to do was to reduce summer school, to pull it right out of our general fund. It's an area that we know we can use the relief funds, which is a bit of a segue, but some of the challenges with the relief funds is the timeframes in which it had to be used earlier in the year, which have loosened up, and also the parameters for the ways in which they can be spent. So we continue to monitor that as we do this budget work. Co-curricular stipends, some of those things just increase over time, contractual and cost of running business. But overall, large in part due to summer school being moved to relief funds, Article 4 is down. Article 5 is student and staff support. So you see guidance, health, instructional technology, training, library services, and other things. Also want to note that this is up pretty big for a couple of reasons. One is Karen, when she was hired as an assistant superintendent, we want to make sure that lands in the right space and also in the budget. And also IT is up 1.2 million in this proposed budget for a total of being up 25.58%. But I do want to share that Dave and his team have done amazing work. We've gone from having a handful of grades, having computers or access to computers, to being one-to-one straight up through, and the resources necessary to do that work, and the software and other technology support. So that's why you see some big numbers there. Another area we're looking for how we might use relief funds to reduce that burden locally. Article 6, system administration. That's out of my office. There's also a noted healthcare reduction. I'm not taking the healthcare from the district, so it saves the district a little bit of money. And again, we have some adjustments there around the assistant superintendent. School administration, which is office of the principal. These are all the folks attached to the principals and administration of the school. That's up 2.13%, again, built around contracts and steps. Student transportation, Bobby's helped oversee our transportation and nutrition area, but the transportation work and shifts that have happened this year are a great tribute to a lot of work. The overall is down 0.5%. We've done some things to reduce this, again, looking at relief funds, but also found savings in changing routes and redirecting some traffic to different places, including out of district placements. Our transportation team has done a great job there. Facilities, the operation and maintenance of plant, capital renewal and renovations. And we're looking again at relief funds to help support our infrastructure that are allowable. I know one of the things that has come up greatly is how much the project at the middle school might cost if it's approved. There's things that we can do and things that we can't do. And going after that heating system with the relief funds, we've been told is not something we're able to do. But that's at 7.75 million, and that's up 7.76%. I will say that walking in to this conversation tonight, we've cut a great deal out of both facilities and technology before these numbers are even before you. Article 10 is debt service. As an area, you can see that that's up. Article 11 is listed as all other. It's a $29,000 whole budget item, and that's flat. It's built around crossing guards and supports there. So our parking lot review, items range from positions to supplies, reinstated by school committee vote. That was last Wednesday on the 17th. These are still being reviewed to see what could happen or what could be paid for with relief funds. All in all, over $1 million was voted to be reinstated. But I wanted to be clear with you that those items are not in the current binder that we had passed to you on March 3rd. Those are things that happened last Wednesday, and as we do our work to get that sorted out, we'll have that updated information available to you. So in this budget draft, and again, Heather may have some corrections on these numbers as time has elapsed here, a few weeks. The FY20 mill rate was 1078, and then last year down to 1037. That was down 41 cents from FY20. And this draft as proposed, the mill rate is 1183, and that's a $1.46 increase per thousand on the assessed value for the mill rate. So just a quick summary. Again, the cost drivers for us are debt service, salaries, benefits, and bringing resources to our language learners. Still looking for how relief funds can be used to reduce increases to taxpayers, but can create a budget shock. So anything that we pay when that money runs out, we'll be looking at a situation where we're trying to make ends meet, and we want to be smart about it. The school committee again has identified just over $1 million in reinstatements from reductions that I've made, and the proposed draft prior to reinstatements is an increase, as I just shared, of $1.46 on the mill rate. From the proposed municipal budget, I just excerpt this. You can see the school expense under operating expenses, the percent change of 6.99 and the debt service of 6.64. And that's the end for me. I'm going to stop sharing. I can pull it back up if anybody wants to look at a particular slide, but I can't see anyone while I'm sharing. So I'm going to stop my share if that's okay, and I'll entertain any questions you have. Bobby has tons of detailed information if requested. She's very good and very resourceful with that. And Chair Parks and I talked about it beforehand. She said it might just be easier if I call on people as I see them and try to answer questions as we go. Councilor Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Langlis. All right. I guess my first question would be, last year you guys kind of got like a lot of extra funding. And so it seemed like a lot of new positions and programs were added in. And at the time, I kind of felt like you're not going to have the money for this next year. And the only way to pay for it is going to be with a big tax increase or somehow a new windfall of money coming in. It kind of feels like we're at that point right now where we're at that position and a big increase in the taxes is being requested or could be requested. So from all the things that were added last year, I know it was before you started, Mr. Langlis, of all the new positions and programs added last year, what have you guys decided to cut yet? And what have you decided to keep?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I'll do my best to answer it. I know that last year there were a few positions added for SEL and equity work. We also added a community relations resource coordinator. So those were some things that happened beforehand. Positions beyond that, I don't know if Bobby or Karen want to bring mention to that. The major reductions this year that I've mentioned or alluded to have been in vacant positions. So positions that we struggled to fill. We had the audit that mentioned we have a number there that they think we can reduce, and we work towards trying to do that.
Okay.
Bobby or Karen, if you want to add to that at all with new positions or reductions.
I'm happy to add a little bit. I think you did a good job, Superintendent Langlis, on the positions. I do want to say that last year in the budget, we had a very robust professional development budget, and that has been significantly reduced. So that, for me anyways, that's a little concerning, but that doesn't exist right now.
So I'll just add, of the 3 positions that I am thinking about that were added that you mentioned, Jake, well, the community engagement person, the SEL position, and then the continuous school improvement coordinator. 2 of those 3 are grant funded through title funds, and they continue to remain in those title grant funds at this point. Only one of those positions is in the local budget and remains in the local budget. And in terms of Impact Academy, which was a program that was added, we did add those positions. Those positions remain. We've also taken some positions from the middle school and the high school to cover additional positions that were needed. So teaching positions, a counselor position was moved from the middle school to cover Impact Academy. There were a couple others. So those things have been, over the course of the year, within the local budget, have been moved to cover some of those things. So they haven't been removed, but we've used the resources we have to cover the needs in those places.
Okay. When you say the Title I grants, you mean like the money we receive for Title I?
Yeah, so the SEL position, the SEL and equity coordinator, is actually paid for with Title IV funds, which we receive to help us with our social emotional learning, along with other aspects of teaching in learning. And then the continuous school improvement coordinator, that's paid with Title I and Title II funds. So Title II funds are professional development, and Title I funds, we have some district projects, and we have school projects, and those are fun. That's federal. Those are all federal funds we receive every year.
Okay, it's fair to say though that if you didn't use the money to pay for those positions, you could use it otherwise for things that may be in the budget paid for by local tax dollars.
We have, I mean, I guess the short answer is yes, but we have to have a plan to show what we need, and that's what we did, and those funds were approved for that. So technically, I guess the answer to that question is yes, but we wrote a plan to cover those positions with those federal funds.
Yeah, okay, it makes sense. I guess what I'm hinting at is the school committee may have to make a tough decision coming up here, because those funds could be used for things that are being paid for, with local tax dollars. And so if you guys want to keep these, positions, you might have to make some tough decisions is all I'm saying. So, because like the money wasn't specifically for these positions, you guys kind of apply and get to decide how the money is used. I mean, my time in the school committee, there's a lot of confusion about that. And, we did kind of realize that towards the end of my tenure there. So I just want to make sure that that's not lost. I guess I missed it. Is adult education cost neutral, or didn't it used to be?
It's almost neutral. We had a slight increase due to a couple of folks grabbing health insurance. I don't know, Bobby, if you want to speak to any other additions. It's real close, 2%, I think.
Lou, can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, I just remember adult education used to be cost neutral, or actually run a benefit surplus. Now it's not.
It isn't. It's actually salary increases along with health insurance increases. That's what's driving that. Nothing else.
Okay, cool. I guess not so much a question, but I guess more some comments. Looking at the LCIP and what's being asked to for borrowing, it's quite a bit. I mean, on the city side, where I guess it's close. I understand the concerns with like the middle school. I know that's been on our radar for quite a while, and I'm not going to be the one that says we shouldn't go for that, because we probably should have a long time ago. So I don't want to throw support for that, but just looking at all the other projects that come along with it, like I know with the expansion at the high school, that opens up some space in the basement of LHS. I know the ventilation is not great down there, but I mean, is it possible that you could move like some things that happen at the Dingley basement to that location, so that we wouldn't have to do the 600,000? I think that's like one thought I have. And just looking otherwise, like, can any of the paving be put off for a year? I know it's not going to be great for anyone trying to park there, but big picture, is it worth putting that off for a year? Again, it's just tough. It's a lot that's being asked for, especially with the LHS expansion that was just approved by voters, and with everything that's being requested in the budget. I just feel like there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I don't want to get into how you guys should decide the programming. That's your decision, not ours. But with what's being asked for, it's just too much right now. So I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you. So I have several questions, and at any point, if somebody else wants to jump in with questions, I would encourage that. Can you share with the council how many unbudgeted positions have been added over the past year?
So in new positions that range from positions and stipends, if you'd entertain me, I can rattle off a list. We have 4 teachers for ELMS, which is an online version of middle school, and looking at how successful that was this year, with a lot of interest in it continuing. A music teacher for the middle school, and also potentially split at lower levels. Listed as a modern classical language teacher, but it's a Spanish position that was unfilled.
Jake, are you talking about positions I think what the mayor is asking is like those tech positions we added.
I'm asking for the number of unfunded positions that were added over the past year.
So how like Director Terrio came to us and we funded those.
Yes, my apologies. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, we added 3 technology staff. We moved some funds around in our payroll office. So we added 1.5 positions there in payroll. We added 1 person to assist with student resources connected to the store next door. And you think of any others, Karen or Bobby? I know there's another one, I believe.
Yes, so just to back up on the payroll, they were not new positions. They were already in the budget. We reallocated the money during last year's budget process to fund the community. I don't know if I'm going to get the title right, but the community and family engagement coordinator position. So it's not that they are new. They are now being funded. The school committee also approved this fiscal year for a I can't remember what her title is for our homeless coordinator.
Yeah, that's.
Did you mention that?
Yep, that's the student resources. And
okay.
So only 5 positions have been added over the past year that were unfunded, approximately.
I would say approximately, and as Bobby mentioned, the clarification on the 1.5 in payroll. So. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then open unfilled positions, how many are currently open and unfilled that have been unfilled for at least 1.5 to 2 years?
So the open and unfilled positions in total, we are around 70, I believe. Bobby may have an updated number that changes on the daily basis with hiring. But of those unfilled positions, I want to be upfront with you that the vast majority of them, about 2/3 prior to the reductions we made, are filled on a daily basis using substitutes. So they're not permanent employees, but we do have people doing that work on a daily basis.
Okay. Just give me 1 second.
And many of those, Mayor Carrier, are ed tech positions.
Okay, thank you. And then I think you spoke briefly about the savings or the possible savings in special education from the report that was recently done. So that wasn't possible to get that done before this budget year, to get that in play before this budget year, knowing that there would be significant increases coming your way?
So we've looked hard at it. I think what we've come to find is it's where the IEPs are that I have some concerns. I think that there are places where we're not doing some things that I'd like to be doing, and there are places where we are doing things that I think that in a different IEP process we might not otherwise do. And the audit report came to us with some savings there around some of our structure as a district, but also in prescribed positions within an IEP that we can't walk away from until we have a process in place to do that accurately. So for example, we have a number of students who have an IEP that says that they will have a 1-to-1 staff. And we can't just remove the 1-to-1 staff. It's written into their IEP, we need to provide it. But the real question is systemically, should that IEP have written into it a 1-to-1 staff? And so that's where I want to do some more digging, because I believe that there can be some savings found there.
Okay.
We have initiated an audit to look at our IEPs.
But that'll be a process, that the results of that. Do you know when you would expect those results?
Karen, I don't know if you want to share your most recent conversation that talked about the structure of that review process.
Yeah, the hope is to begin that process within the next month and a half, depending on what the restrictions are in terms of meetings and travel and all of that, but that's the hope. And hopefully have some results by fall.
Okay, thank you for that. So if I understand from your presentation, you came in and I might not be exact on numbers that I'm ready to, that I'm going to share, but you came into the school committee with a $6.2 million increase. And since that time, the school committee has increased that an additional 1.2 million. That's not shown in the book. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, between reinstatements and some other corrections that we found along the way. The latest number is to find, not find, but the school committee has voted to put about that 1.2 back into the conversation.
Okay. And does admin have, so where are you at with that? The superintendent, I mean, is there some savings in this current proposal that may be achieved while still moving our district forward? Or as superintendent, do you feel you're at a place that this is going to be the ask? And
I'd like to reduce some things with relief funds where I can, to reduce the ask on both the taxpayer and also the use of carryover funds. I'd like to see those reduced. I do listen to the committee and listen to their guidance in this process, and I know that we're looking at how we can spend those relief funds and in which ways to make it not a stopgap in a year. And we're still reviewing those rules and what items could go that way. I would say that the items that were reduced, that $1 million was part of the larger conversation in which I know Bobby worked really hard to look for ways in which to save money, to cut that $10 million before we even put the draft in front of anyone. So that's our challenge. We were looking hard before that $1 million was reinstated. We were looking hard at trying to make sure we could preserve positions.
all right, thank you. So I just have, this is more of a comment than versus a question, but last year, with the start of the pandemic, there was so much uncertainty that our community faced, and the city's goal was to try to reduce our budget to a point that we had a zero increase. And then I think it was shared with, administration at the school that we'd like some consideration as well in that area. And the school department really did step up to the plate. And I think the community needs to recognize that. And subsequently, instead of just a flat budget, the school came in with, I think, around 2.4 million in reductions, which reduced the overall, our overall taxes by, I think, 0.24%, or I'm sorry, 24 cents. But with this budget, not only does it increase the original cut of that 2.4 million, but it also increases approximately 3.8, and now potentially another 1.2 that's been added to that budget. And I understand, so when I was on the school committee, I heard over and over again that our only responsibility as committee members was the students, but that just is not a factual statement. We have a responsibility to our taxpayers in the community as well, all elected officials. It's kind of like the city. We have a responsibility to provide services to folks that are struggling in life. So we have social services that we have a responsibility for, but that responsibility should kind of go over to the property taxpayers in this community. We also live in a community with a significant amount of poverty, and we have many households here that they live paycheck to paycheck. And to expect a significant tax increase while still in kind of a pandemic mode really could force people out of their houses. So I'm going to ask, as mayor, I think I'm going to ask the committee to, yes, keep students in mind. We want a district that's moving forward. We want to see our graduation rates go up. And although we increase the budget every year, we don't seem to be moving that needle when it comes to the students. And I know all good intentions, we are trying, but we can't, a significant increase like this will truly be felt the worst, the hardest by people living in poverty, people who are renting apartment buildings. Right now, rent is almost out of control for most of our community members, unless they have a good paying job. a significant increase like this will be shifted to those folks. Not the landlord's not going to pay that. That's going to be added to the rent. And we have such a large number of people that live on the line in this community. Any significant increase in their insurance or electric bills or property taxes could be that amount that pushes them over the edge. So I just want to share those thoughts with the committee. I recognize what a difficult process budget time is for everybody. We face that same thing every year. It seems like the school faces it worse though, because of long-term underfunding. But I think a significant increase like this year is just a little too much. And I fear that when it goes to referendum, much more could be cut from this budget than we would hope to see because of that referendum. So thank you, and I appreciate the hard work everybody's doing.
Thank you. Councillor Ray.
Thanks. I know I've had a lot to say on both sides of this process, but I don't want the soundbite to be what's already been said. I want to re-emphasize Superintendent Langless's memo, which says that the presented budget does not meet the needs of our Lewiston learners, and how difficult that is to confront as a dedicated school committee. The 8 members who I serve with and myself have to take that to heart when it's said to us, because time and time again, we have underfunded the schools, whether it's through LCIP or through operational budget. And I realize there are some easy targets, that we are going over the superintendent's proposed budget, that there is some additional CARES funding, CRF funding, American Rescue Act funding, which I think the city will benefit from as well. But I think we have a process on our side, and I just want to share a bit of that. The parking lot had 43 items on it, and only those with a affirmative vote of 5 or more passed through for that additional 1.2 million that we're considering. I don't think that means the work is done and we just push all of that through. I think the superintendent and the administration have noted that they're going to do some more work on that, but I think we did have 6 hours of deliberation on that parking lot list. And, the meeting prior to that, we had 6 hours of deliberation. So I do want to highlight the work that has already been done and give credit to that. I think it's helpful that the council is providing direction here. And I think the administration and the school committee, I don't speak for all of them, but I think are willing to go back and do this work. But again, I don't want the soundbite to be that this was presented and just shot down. There's already been a lot of work on it. I will also reference Assistant Superintendent Paquette was talking about the title funded positions earlier, and we did choose through an affirmative vote of 6 folks to move one of the title positions into the general fund because it is so important to our school committee. So I would just highlight that is one of the parking lot items that was handled on Wednesday night. And there was great discussion around that. So if folks have questions, happy to answer, but did just want to highlight that going forward.
Thank you. Councilor Jelinas.
Thank you, Superintendent. I just want to, thank you for the work that you and your team have done, and the school committee as well. This is rugged work for sure, and it's difficult. I would echo what Mayor Kerr said when he talked about, it's important for us not only to take care of our students, but our taxpayers. And I'd add to that our staff, our teachers, who are showing up day in and day out and doing really tough work, especially within this pandemic. So I guess I just want to make sure I'm understanding. You talked about how 10 million was shaved from the budget, and then I think I heard 1.05 to be reinstated. Did that include or not include the relief funds, Ms. Avery? I know that
does not include the relief funds. We still have that work to do. Okay,
thank you. And then I was just gonna, one more thing. I'm just gonna say that, that certainly a couple articles interested me. I understand Article 2 when you got into the special education audit a little bit, and that really is about determinations being made at the IEP process, and that makes good sense. Another one that kind of picked up, I just wanted a little more explanation on this, was you talked about the need to better serve our ELL population. And I think I saw a figure of 1.2 million in an increase. And you talked briefly about ratios and schedules. And I think that's what I heard was ratios and schedules. And just wondered if you could just comment on that real quick.
Yeah, a couple of things. We really need to do some more training with staff, and so they're familiar with the models that are most beneficial to students. We go to some best practices, things like the SIOP model for sheltered instruction, the observation protocol, and working with students so that we can ensure that we're not just talking over people, but that they have an opportunity to learn the context that we're intending to teach. But to do that, there are some suggested and recommended models out there that exist. And when I talked about ratios and block scheduling or scheduling, it's really about how many opportunities do students who are acquiring English as a language, how many opportunities do they have to have that support, so that there's additional instruction that will intensify or hopefully rapidly increase the rate of language acquisition because of our programming, which right now I think we do a really good job with what we have, but it's just falling so short because we don't have the resources we need to ensure that students have, again, that high quality instruction, an additional block of language learning, the language acquisition opportunities built into their day. And when we start looking at those breakdowns with such a large enrollment, it gets expensive in a hurry. So that's where that 1.2 comes from.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Sure. Looks like school committee member Keenan Majerus Collins. Stand up.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate Councillor Ray's point and make it clear to everyone that from my perspective, and I suspect from the perspective of a number of school committee members, our priority is to provide the best possible education for students in Lewiston. And when we got an initial budget that flat out admitted that it didn't meet the needs of our students, that was a gut punch and it was unacceptable. And I hope that a school budget that did not meet the needs of our students would be unacceptable to every member of this council as well. I think that what's before you tonight is a reasonable and responsible ask, consistent with our commitment that I sincerely hope is shared across the board, to making sure that Lewiston students receive the best possible education. We all understand that ultimately our city's future and our city's future economic development depends upon having the best schools possible.
I'm trying to go to who I think was next. Member Pettingill, Councillor Pettingill, excuse me.
Thank you, Superintendent. So it's been mentioned a few times, and it's bolded very, very clearly at the beginning of the book that this budget does not meet the needs of our students. I think it would be fair to say that tagline could have been included in other budgets. But what strikes me, and I think that the mayor's comments were spot on with this, but as we go through it with the brief presentation, all of the increases appear to be going towards staff salaries and fringe benefits and healthcare. So it really begs the question of how are we bettering the educational opportunities for our students in Lewiston? And it's more of a rhetorical question. I'm not really looking for a response. I know myself personally, as a parent of 2 students in the public school system, as a taxpayer within Lewiston, I don't support this budget. I don't think it supports our students at all. Quite frankly, if you had put out a budget that said, hey, we're going to be going to school early in August, so that way these kids can all get together and learn how to be around other people, I'd say, okay. If the budget included 36 social and emotional teachers, I would stand up and applaud you, because I think that is something that was sorely needed before the pandemic. And I think it is going to be so much more crucial and critical, not only for student success, but for student health and well-being going forward. And then not like to say sports opportunities kind of limits it, because I know not everybody's into sports, but intramurals, I mean, I was a geek kid, I loved being part of the chess club. So opportunities like that for just kids to be kids. So much learning happens on the playground. That's where we develop those critical thinking skills that are so important later on in life. But again, it's if we're going to be saying, we're improving educational opportunities for students, let's make sure that we're doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Langlis. I guess I did want to take a second to commend you all for letting the work done in this. School budgets are not an easy thing, and clearly looking at the packet here, I mean, it's always been something. So I did want to thank you guys and for all the work that you put into it, whether or not you have to put more work in or not. I think you have done quite a lot of work, and those meetings have lasted quite a long time. So I did want to give kudos there. I did also kind of want to acknowledge that, if any educator in Lewiston is watching tonight, they're probably a little disheartened by what they're hearing. I don't want to brush over that fact and not acknowledge that. It's tough because we talk about it not meeting the needs of our students. Do we have a number that could meet the needs of our students? Do we know exactly what that would be? The answer is probably no. I don't think any district really in the state, maybe even, nationwide, it's a problem. As a teacher, I'll be the first one to say that there is a crisis in this country in education and education funding, especially for Title I schools. Clearly have the money for it. We're just not allocating it for it. We don't have the money at the municipal level, especially in Maine, to meet the needs of our students. And it's not fair to just to have the taxpayers write a blank check, because that does have a lot of devastating consequences on our community. If we pass a school budget with the amount that's being requested, I can't see us having a recreation department. I can just imagine all the cuts going on in my mind, because as a council, we're not just going to raise taxes to meet that. We're going to see what we can cut on our side. It's just going to happen that way. So I don't think any municipality in Maine is in a position really, at least 98% of them, to fully meet the needs of their students. And even as a state, we might not have the full amount of money that we need to cover all the funding for public education as a state. I think the money only exists at the federal level. And until there's a major shift in something there, and it comes down to the states, at least the Title I schools, we're going to keep having this crisis. And to be honest, this is out of our hands. So as an educator myself, I find it extremely frustrating, but I know the solution isn't just to have our taxpayers write a blank check, because that does have devastating consequences in the community. That's not to say that a city council should be extremely stingy, as a lot of city councils are. Again, also having devastating effects on the school community. It's a tough balance that we're never going to meet, at least not the way things are right now in this current crisis. So, to any educator in Lewiston watching this, I'll flat out say I'm sorry. We can't meet the needs. We cannot meet the level of budget that's being asked of us right now without it having consequences in the community that are just going to be too great. I hate to say that. I'd love for as a society nationally to embrace education and just double our funding for schools, because that would be an investment. After 20 years, crime would go down, levels of education would go up, society would be better. It would be a major investment that would pay off. But until the will of politics gets there, I don't see this crisis in education changing. So I guess there's a lot to acknowledge. This is just not fun. And being on the school committee, having to make a budget and craft a budget, you're never going to like what you come up with. Last year was a little different because of the funding that came in. That was just not a normal budget year for you guys. These are tough. So I don't envy the decisions you guys have to make, but I trust going forward, you guys can find some ways to reduce this.
Thank you. Councilor Khalid.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'm going to go back to what the mayor had to say a few minutes ago. I'm not his best cheerleader by any means, but what he said is definitely apropos. Government exists for the primary reason of protecting its citizens. That's number one. We have a crisis now in some of our protective services on the city side of the budget. I don't know how we're going to address that. We're certainly not going to address it with a major tax increase, and certainly not with a major tax increase from both sides of the budget. Now, education has a place in government, and unfortunately, in my estimation, that's number two. The reason we are funded as a government, or the reason that governments were originally set about, was to protect the citizens from things like pandemics, from feudal warlords, and all these things. At that point, education didn't really exist. It came into the fray. So protection one, education two, everything else is bells and whistles. And this is not going to be a bells and whistles year. And I don't know how much we're going to get for protection or for schools. It's going to be a hard fight. Nobody here on the city side of the budget begrudges anybody on the school department, particularly those teachers that have worked during the pandemic. But we have many police officers and firefighters that have worked very hard, have managed to come down with COVID infections. We have significant vacancies from time to time because of these things. It's a terrible year. Now, I've been in government for 45 years. I've yet to have a year where somebody said, hey, take this back and add to it because it's going to be a great year. It just never happens. This is certainly not going to be one of those years. So I think we need to look at this with very sharp pencils and understand that it is a bad year for our taxpayers. Again, we don't know for sure when we're going to come out of this pandemic. We don't know how we're going to come out of this pandemic, what damage is going to be done. Granted, there's going to be damage done to the children. I truly believe that. But there's also damage been done to our community. Businesses have closed. People have lost jobs. Some people will never be working again. So we need to keep these things at the forefront. I recognize the fact when I first opened your budget book that said it does not meet the needs of the students. I can appreciate that. But I can also appreciate that the budget is presented to us on the city side does not meet the city's needs, but we're not going to be able to fund it at the level that was originally requested. We're going to have to make some painful cuts. And I think that behooves all of us to recognize that as we go forward. And I thank you for your time.
Councillor Sophia Khalid.
Thank you. I don't know if you called me the first time, so.
I did.
It's okay. I've heard and know the struggles and the challenges our entire community faces, but our students also have been impacted and have fallen behind in their education, and it's very, very evident because I have a little brother and I have a lot of cousins and families that I see every day that are really struggling. Whether on the city side, on the city side, we have given landlords relief or business loans or other resources. What are we providing our students, and what am I hearing tonight is to, it's to not provide services to our students and do more cutting and program service cuts. And unfortunately, Lewiston Public Schools has long time underserved our ELL students and their families, and I'm glad they are finally building a more quality education. So I think I'm going to be the only counselor who's supportive of the budget. Tonight I was coming in with more questions and more ideas to to cut services and programs or positions or whatever it is, but I think considering the pandemic and what the many challenges it has brought about, especially our students and how they have fallen behind in their education, we really need to support them, right? And you would know that if any of the counselors have families or kids at home currently going to school. So thank you.
School committee member Potvin.
Yeah, I'd like to make some comments about putting things in perspective, and I want to be able to go through this budget and clearly identify not what we're asking, but why are we asking? Why are we coming forward with almost $7 million in increase? And a good chunk of it, it pretty much breaks down in 3 different directions. One thing that has to be aware is the voters approved $1 million a year for this high school expansion. So they've given their blessing on this. There's $1 million right there. Now let's go up to Augusta and talk about the teacher minimum wage mandate, which comes to about $800,000, $900,000. What choice do we have with that? That's just handed to us from the state. Then when you take a look at, you know, the other pieces that add up into this, 1.5 million, sure, salary increases and benefits. We have 1,100 employees. And as you folks take a look at your city budget and you see the number of employees you have, you're going to see that same proportional increase, that 1.5. Then when we want to talk about ELL, when I took this job last year and I respectively reviewed budgets, this is a lot of this has to do with I have no other better word than negligence of previous administrations and school committees of not addressing things that had to get addressed 6 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, and kept getting pushed off. And now we're faced to a point where we're almost in a libel situation when it comes to the ELL. And the school committee made a decision that it stops now. We have to address this now, this year. So if you take your pencils out and you do the math, we're already somewhere around 4.5 million without even talking about options, having discussions. Now, 2.5 million was added into that with a superintendent's proposal and with the additions that we made to address 2 specific items. Again, when I came on board last year, we were losing those most vulnerable students. This committee made a decision to individually address each item of concern. We went right down the list: homelessness, special education, ELL. Okay, we wanted to alternative education. We addressed every single vulnerable population that is impacting our numbers, the very numbers everybody speaks of when they say, well, what are they doing? We recognized where we could improve things. So a good portion of that 2.5 million is addressing those very issues to change those numbers. The other portion of this increase is the remediation to those students of what they just went through for the past year. Where are they now? Parents ask me every day, how do we know where the students sit? Where are they at right now? How are we going to find out, and how do we get them back to where we need them to be? And a lot of what we've put into this budget addresses that remediation. So when you take into account $4.5 million of we have no say about it, we have to do it, and we're taking 2.5 million. Oh, by the way, I didn't agree with it last year. I thought it was a terrible move for us not to have an increase last year, because we already knew we needed an increase last year. And we arbitrarily just pushed things off another year and made things worse. So a good chunk of that 2.5 million is what we should have gotten last year to address the needs of the students. So when you take in all of that into account, you have a budget that's taking care of mandates. You have a budget that's individually addressing the most vulnerable of our populations in the most productive way. And you have a budget that's setting up for bringing the kids back into school and to get them back to where they are. Now, all that being said, do I think that there's areas we can reduce? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I made proposals to try to, have corresponding cuts when we were adding things, but it wasn't accepted. I still think those things are on the table. I think a portion of those cuts can happen. The part that is going to be taking place with the COVID funds. Very nervous about it because, yeah, we can go ahead and spend those COVID funds on these things, but we're going to have to keep an eye on next year and what's not going to be funded that we're going to then have to address going down that line. So I think that there's a happy medium in there somewhere that between COVID funds, further reductions, that we can reduce this number. But honestly, folks, I don't see it. I don't see how you can move a school department forward without continuing the same thing that's happened for years on the school committee of kicking the can down the road. And I think that we have a grand opportunity this year with the federal funding and COVID to address these things. And I'll leave it with this. I would like to know from the city's perspective, you're going to be getting quite a chunk of money from the federal government. And I'm wondering what the proposal is in working with the school department in addressing how the distribution of these federal funds will be. So I'll leave it at that. If Mr. Mayor that could answer that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you all set with me responding? All right, thank you. Well, one, it's not my place to respond to that, committee member Potvin. I mean, first of all, we don't even understand the rules around that money. It will be a council decision on that. But like the school committee, we also have budgets that we don't provide the needed services, because that's part of what budgeting is all about. You identify your needs, you identify the pot of money that you have, and you do the best you can with it. I do it in my family's household, and just like every community member who's on the verge of being evicted from their apartment or foreclosed on their property, they have to do that every week. So I know it's challenging, and I know I'm so glad Councilor Jensen brought up the teachers, because absolutely, I mean, they do so much work in our community, and I know this is challenging, but it is challenging time. So I'll end it there, but thank you.
Thank you. Councilor LaJoy.
Thank you, Mr. Swoop. Whoops. Unmuted. There we go. Thank you, Superintendent. Much has been said that were part of my thoughts this evening, and very well, and I think it's an excellent discussions that we've been having, and a lot of truth to it. But Member Podvin from the school mentioned that the taxes had not gone up last year. And it seems that when we do things like that, we do go in reverse. However, I think at the time with the pandemic upon us, that might have been the proper direction to go into. I even spoke to my wife today and we discussed the matter, and that particular subject came up. So yeah, we're going to have to make up that difference. I think both sides, both the school committee and the city council, have a huge task in front of them. And I don't know if either side is going to come out happy with this, let alone the citizens. It's going to be tough all around. So thank you for the good work that you've produced so far. But I think there's more work to be done. And I know on the city council side, I express my thoughts with regards as to a large increase, that I was negative about that. And I think if it would go to the citizens, it would be voted down. So thank you for my comments, and thank you.
School Committee Member Hawkins.
So I will try to be brief. Much of what I want to say, Mr. Potvinori said for me. Thank you very much, Ron. I appreciate that, because I'm not sure I could have been as diplomatic as Ron was. So just so that the City Council can understand a little bit of where I'm coming from, I live on Maple Street. I am the first person in my family to not only graduate high school, but then college. And a lot of that is due to teachers that actually gave a damn, that noticed, hey, she's struggling in this. How can we help? I've also driven a school bus, so I know what it's like to have 64 kids in a metal tin can rolling down the road. This year has been a learning curve on so many levels for so many people. The exhaustion I see in the community every day, I'm not surprised. My frustration comes in when I live next door to people that are going to be homeless in a week or 2 or 3, depending on when the moratorium ends and landlords decide to do what they're going to do, because they're going to do it. My concern is for our students, because at the end of the day, those students will grow up in this community or elsewhere, depending on what happens here, and they will either drive this economy that struggles in this town in the first place, or they won't. Education is how we help them drive the economy in the future. If we start failing them now or continue to fail them now, they're not going to graduate high school. They're not going to go to college. They're not going to hire on in the trades. They're going to see, well, the school system doesn't care and the city doesn't care, so why should I care? And you wouldn't believe how much of that I hear from young people in the downtown already. I know this is hard. I know asking for 1.5 million after what the superintendent did cut out is hard. I wish, and I've said this before, and the other school committee member, school members will recognize this saying, I wish the city and our school department had a fairy godparent, because we need one. We don't have one though. I look forward to working with the committee to try and cut what we can, but we're trying to figure out how to help these kids get their feet back under them. And that takes resources. And that's just a fact.
Thank you, Member Hawkins. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Langlis. Just to clarify, a little while ago, it sounded like there may have been some confusion. So the school budget last year, the local tax burden went down, but the overall school budget itself actually went up, right? The expenditures went up. So yeah, so in that case, it's not really fair to say that you guys went backwards at all, because you did increase school funding. You just got it from a new source other than the local property tax base. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to say you went backwards at all. And I just want to remind you guys that, even if you do put it forward, the same amount to us, we on the council are going to make cuts before we raise the tax burden. And so if we have to raise the tax burden by what you present to us, then, if we had to do it, we would, but like we would be looking at everything we could possibly cut before we'd go to raise taxes, at least at a reason, more than a reasonable rate. So don't think that it's just going to go to like an increase in taxes. It's going to be a lot of cuts in the city that you guys probably won't, necessarily want to see, and that we really don't want to have to work through as well. So I think that's probably going to be my last comment of the night, and I thank you all.
Thank you, Councillor Jensen. Councillor Ray.
Trying to keep it brief in the interest of time, and I know I talk a lot about these things, but I'm so glad to see the fire that some folks are bringing to their commentary tonight. I think it's important that we are having a real debate about this, and I think as a member of the council who will support this budget as it currently stands, I think the story that has been missing on the council in the past year, I mean, I've never represented the city without representing on the school committee. So Perhaps I get more of a view into this, but in case it's helpful to my fellow counselors, for the past year, over a year now, on March 22nd, 2021, we have, for the safety of adults, limited how many children are in these buildings. And we have, from the ground up, built a virtual system for learning that has worked for some and has not worked for others. And I will publicly acknowledge that the in-person works for some and the virtual works for some, but none of it's perfect. We still cannot predict how we go back to school in August, even with some really exciting and good news that we've heard recently about vaccinations and about reducing CDC guidelines a bit. It looks different for Lewiston than it does for other communities, though. And so as we think about what we have asked for students to really give up in this past year, I think we owe it to them to prioritize them as we move forward. There are so many needs. And, you know, I think last Wednesday night got pretty emotional on a lot of the subjects, because which students do we choose to leave behind yet again is the question that's being asked when we reduce budgets by line item. And it's just gotten to this point where, again, we have asked our students to give up so much. We have asked our staff to risk so much this past year. And I think this is the place where we need to spend our money. We can say all we want, you know, we wish we could do something about school funding. We can vote this budget through the council, and we can vote items through the school committee. And I understand what that does for taxpayers, but after this past year, I think it's what we owe to our school community.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Pettingill.
Thank you, Superintendent. So going back to my previous comments of taking care of our students, and anybody that's not a parent of a student currently, or anybody that's not an educator currently, it isn't having to deal with the emotional turmoil that, you know, all the students are facing in every single grade level. You know, when I speak to the social emotional learning and how important that's going to be, within a year, overnight, we've asked our students to deal with this situation that they don't understand because we don't understand it. You know, we've told them that everything in the world is dangerous, everything is scary, everything can kill you, everything can make you sick, everything can make your family members sick, and all the same. You know, it's been forced on everybody, you know, 24/7. The emotional turmoil that these students are facing is showing up in their learning habits, the anxiety and the frustration and their inability to access differentiated instruction really shows through in how they're doing their work. You know, with watching students, the frustration when they can't make an equation work isn't normal. You know, I fully get that not everybody wants to go back to in-person instruction, and it would be remiss to say that the talk out there in the community that there's members out there that don't want us to go back to in-person instruction. It is scary. You know, it is beneficial for our students to have access to this education. You know, so I really am serious in the sentiment that social and emotional learning is going to be a large portion of the budget moving forward. You know, and I appreciate the the head nod on you, Superintendent. I know full well you understand it. And especially if it's something that we catch early, you know, with our younger students, it will benefit them in the future for us to be able to help them cope with these big emotions and these things that they don't understand yet, but for us to give them the coping skills and the coping mechanisms and show them that it will be all right. Thank you for letting me speak again.
Member Majerus Collins.
Well, I just wanted to say that I really appreciated what Councillor Pettengill had to say there about social and emotional learning. I know that this school committee has been supportive of our SEL programs, and that's why we voted to move the SEL coordinator position into the regular budget to protect it from any fluctuations in title funds. But Councillor Pettengill's passion for this issue is inspiring, and I just want to let him and everybody else know that I'll be seeking to add additional SEL positions to the budget at our next meeting.
There's some opportunity to look at those types of positions and those supports with the relief funds. I think it's very appropriate to be considering how we can support our students transition as we move through better COVID times, I guess, if that's a thing. I'm seeing a hand from Member Physic.
Thank you. I didn't intend to say anything at this this meeting. It's my first one. I just kind of wanted to sit and kind of observe everything, hear what everyone's saying. But I just wanted to add, as I got my other computer up and I'm looking through the parking lot list, and I'm looking at different things that we voted in, reading recovery, math interventionist, extra instructional supplies for all schools that were cut. I just start looking over a list of a lot of things and a lot of these same things have been cut over the years. And I get it about the whole thing, trying to cut positions and taxes on the city side. I mean, we cut our rec program coordinator last year, and you know, that's another thing that was for the kids, and I get it. But then it comes to a point of when do we say enough is enough? When do we draw a line in the sand and go, hey, we're gonna have to do this? And one side is gonna bear the burden of not having what they want, and one side isn't. And I know this committee is gonna go back with a strong look at what's thinking, and we'll probably get more of what we're gonna use the care funds for. I just hope the city council will have an open mind when we do come back of looking at the work that we really did, and really accept the cuts that are going to be made, and maybe not rightly so, but we also understand the position that you're in. These are our kids. I've been in the school system since 2004. And I would say, you know, it's been a rocky road, whether it's on superintendent decisions or whether it's been in our schools. I think our school system has come a long way since '04. We still have a long ways to go. And I think that we really need to take a strong look at this when we come back with that second cut. And I understand your position, and thank you for your time.
There is an opportunity for public comment as part of this workshop. I don't know if any of the attendees would like to raise their hand to participate as well.
There is a hand, Superintendent Langlis.
Yeah, Ms. Scott, go ahead.
She's all set now.
Ms. Scott, can you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to give a comment this evening. So my name is Linda Scott. I live at 45 Pettengill Street. And I think many of you know that I was on the school board for 6 years, and I fully appreciate and understand the budget process that you're going through. I also think many of you know that my first opinion has always been get whatever we can to our students in our schools. But having said that, I think we need to recognize the situation that we're currently in. So my son graduated last year from Lewiston High School. I have grandchildren that go to Lewiston schools. I have helped my adult daughters homeschool my grandchildren through this pandemic year. And I understand fully the difficulties we're going through. I also live on a fixed budget where I am a full-time caregiver to my husband. I don't currently work right now. I'm on a very limited budget. And as a taxpayer, I have to tell you that I am a bit concerned at the possible increase in our taxes.
Wow.
I would also like to comment that, I have watched every single one of the budget meetings from both the city council and the school committee. I spent the 6 hours last Wednesday watching the discussion on the parking lot that the school committee had. I really appreciate the work and the difficulty that this is. But I will tell you, I am very concerned that there are not a lot of people that are hearing this. And when you try to bring this budget to vote, it's going to be very difficult to pass with such an increase. Because as somebody that with everything that I do for this community, I am a struggling person. I have no money. I cannot afford this. And I think you need to recognize that there are going to be a lot of people in this community, no matter how much we want to see for our schools. And we do want to see this. I want to see the best for not only the schools, but for the whole city. And I think about, what if we have to cut from the schools, but what if the city council has to make the decision to cut from the rec department, which is just as important. And I appreciate Member Elgin bringing that comment up, because that's just as important for our kids. I don't know where you're going to go with this, but I want you to understand that when this comes out for a vote, it may be very difficult to get the whole community to back and support this, and that you may need to really rethink some of the things that you're asking for and some of the cuts that are going to have to be made. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
There is another hand, Superintendent.
Want to go ahead?
Halima, you're all set?
Yeah. I understand with the whole cut that's being discussed on here. I want to say a little bit about the ELL department, because I feel like as an ELL student myself, who didn't have all the resources growing up, and this is not in Maine, but I feel like it is very necessary to support all our ELLs department, so they can better support and continue to support our kids. They're struggling and they need all the support. I didn't have it, so I can understand what I went through growing up and what they're going through right now at this stage with COVID and all that stuff. I think it is necessary to support our school district, because they are doing the best that they can to support our kids, and any help that they can receive is definitely, it will be helpful, because I know what's like living in poverty. I know what's like being an ELL student, and anything to support our district and our ELL. And I'm speaking of for our teachers too, who are working so hard, because mind you, like, I wasn't a teacher until this year, and I never knew how hard they work until I became one. And it is definitely, I'm speaking for all the teachers, and I'm speaking for all our students, that it is definitely necessary to invest in our district, because they definitely need all the support that they could use. I'll leave it like that, because you're looking at a product of not looking at, but you're hearing from a first experience. I've worked so hard with the support of my family to be where I am, and also with the investment with amazing teachers and professors out there. And if we don't invest in our teachers, especially in our district where we all support each other and support our students to be the best that they can. You know, it is necessary to look at that aspect instead of just looking at, you know, just spending money on a budget. It's not really just spending money on a budget. It is there's a means to it. There's a purpose to it. There's a, you know, there's good people that will come out of it by supporting our students, and they will become a better person and grow the best that they can be. So I'm just saying that I never talk in a bigger setting like this, but I feel like we can't just say, well, this is a budget. It's definitely more than a budget, and we need to keep funding our district and keep allowing them to grow and support our kids. And we will see a lot more behavior. If you're looking at the special ed side, we'll see a lot more behavior due to COVID. It's just like you look at it as in a support system, not as a, you know, as a waste of money. It really isn't as a waste of money. That's all I'm gonna say. I hope these kind of creates a more clear mindset. That's it from.
Thank you, Halima, and thank you for your commitment to the kids in the classroom. We appreciate it. Looks like we have member Beaupont has his hand up, and then after we can go to Kira, who's an attendee.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I cut the line. As the Ward 7 representative for an entire 3 months, I've certainly had my eyes opened on a lot of things that have occurred here. I accepted Committeeman Potvin's invitation to be on the budget subcommittee. And when I saw the budget and all of the zeros, I had sticker shock and hyperventilated. I've been part of this budget process and have seen it built with courage, compassion, and quite frankly, in my opinion, no fat. It is in concert with our 2 established goals of helping needy students and remediation. I want to just remind the council that there is no wish list here. The wish list that I would love to see, but will probably never happen, is free breakfast for all students, free lunch for all students, and a supper bag going home on Fridays. That's just not going to happen. I realize that the cuts that are made here are going to have immediate ramifications and ramifications down the road. Committeeman Majors Collins, Ray, Hawkins, Potvin have all been more eloquent than I do. I tend to get, unfortunately, a little emotional over these things, but I believe in this budget. I can see as a taxpayer the other side of it, but this is a long overdue step that is needed, and I don't look forward to having to make cuts. I don't even want to say it, but thank you for your time.
Hi there. Thank you very much for your time. I am a teacher in Lewiston Public Schools, and I cannot tell you how disheartened I am to hear you say that you feel this budget is too high. So I'd like to share with you a few things about what these budget cuts mean. Every day my students receive a snack. It's free, it comes to my class, there's enough for every student. But that snack often consists of rock hard pears that chew like grainy unripe apples, hard and sour unripe oranges, and flavorless red apples. For obvious reasons, my students don't want to eat these things. I personally can't stomach those things. So as their teacher, I purchase snacks out of my own paycheck because I know that my students need that fuel to get through the day. The school where I work, and I imagine most or all schools in Lewiston, has a supply closet where I can request things like pencils, markers, notebooks, and other such supplies. But sometimes they need things that are not in that closet, and sometimes that closet runs out. For example, I requested that my 6th graders have binders to keep the many materials that we use. Many of my students come to school without them, so I purchase them to make sure that every student gets what they need. because those aren't available in the supply closet. At the beginning of this year, I had 14 students. My class had kind of been emptied and students placed in other 6th grade classes with the expectation that our 5th grade might be so overflowed that I might have to have a combined class. I only requested supplies for those 14 students because it was so difficult to get things at the beginning of the year when every school in the country was trying to get things. So they ran out of markers and colored pencils and pencil boxes and Post-it notes. And every time I got a new student, I went to Walmart and purchased all of those things for my students themselves, because if I didn't buy it, they wouldn't have it. I have many students who need increased ELL support, but we have one ELL teacher supporting both 5th and 6th grades, which means that my students often have limited support. Additionally, during access testing, which is an annual requirement, the ELL teacher is basically unavailable to provide any services for an entire month. So while members of the City Council are stating that adding more staff does not meet the needs of students, the addition of ELL staff means that my students who are struggling won't go without support for up to a month every year. Until this last year, when members of the school district managed to pull together money for books, classroom libraries were predominantly funded by teachers. We know that growing readers requires access to many high quality and representative books. This is my 2nd year as a teacher, although I've held other positions in schools prior to teaching in my own classroom. And in my 1st year, I managed to pull together approximately 700 books at a personal cost of over $1,000. That had to come out of my own pocket because there was no money in the district to fund a library. And the books that were left in my classroom when I took it over, most of them were so old that my kids had no connection to them. We talk about staffing by cutting people employed in special education, but I have students who are being underserved because we simply do not have enough resource room staff to provide it. Last year, I was told that 4 students could not have support for writing in the mainstream setting, and that I, as a mainstream teacher, was expected to provide the accommodations. Their accommodation was scribing for them. I would like to know how I can be expected to simultaneously scribe for 4 separate students while managing and supporting another 16 students in the room. It's impossible. This year, I have 4 students who should be receiving services. Half of them pulled out and half of them supported in the classroom, but there is only 1 person available to support them all. How, you might ask, can 1 person be in both the resource room and my gen ed classroom simultaneously? In short, they can't. So I, as the mainstream teacher, again, have to manage my classroom, support my mainstream students, and provide support and accommodations to 2 students with IEPs all at the same time. So again, where you see adding more staff as not supporting students, I know the effect that those positions will have for my students. I am a teacher, and every year I have to fulfill more and more of my students' needs. This is shown in the money that I and other educators have to expend every year, part of my own salary, our own salaries, for the job that we're doing to help meet the needs of students that the district simply can't at its current level of funding. It is also shown in the number of unpaid hours that I and many other educators like me expend to keep up with the demands of the job. There is a limit to the number of hours that we can expend. And I would like to share with you one of the costs of pushing so much work into our unpaid time and not providing additional staff. I have seen students in 6th grade working at a 1st or 2nd grade level. These students should have been referred for full assessment to see if they qualify for an IEP years ago. But the amount of work and time it requires to get a student to that point is immense. It requires extensive amounts of one-on-one time with any student who you think might qualify before they can even be assessed. But our class sizes regularly top out at 24 or more. How can I spend extensive time with 1 student and leave those other 23 to flounder? The City Council claims that additional staffing expenses won't support our students, but it will. Getting our students more than 15 minutes per day of ELL services will help. Getting our students earlier interventions through math interventionists and reading RTI positions will mean that we can see progress or stagnation and refer them onto higher levels of support sooner, so I don't have sixth graders coming into my room who can't access the curriculum because they are reading at a beginning of first grade level. And yes, I have had several of those students. Making sure that every student has enough staff in their classroom to ensure that they can fully access their education will support students. Providing enough staff to reduce class sizes results in reduced behaviors, increased personalized learning, and more time to accommodate students' individual learning differences. Funding enough staff to fully meet the needs of students with IEPs and 504 plans does support our students. I am struggling with the idea that people, quote, don't want to go back to in-person learning, but I'd like to remind the council that teachers have been doing in-person learning since September. I would also like to inform the council that it's physically impossible to fit entire classes into the spaces that we have at 3 feet of distance. And even if we could, that would mean in many cases that students would not be able to safely eat for the entirety of their time at school. Could you imagine learning, or in your case, working, when you cannot eat between the hours of 8:25 and 2:25, and longer if you include bus rides? How effective would you be at your job? How effective do you think hungry children will be at learning? Educators will be the first to say that we want all of our students at school all of the time, but we also know that we cannot meet the federal and state safety guidelines. Please do not say that there are parties who don't want to go back to in-person learning. We have been doing it all along. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kira. Member Whitlow, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I want to just be clear to everybody who no matter what, if we have to cut anything, I guarantee and promise you that ELL will not be touched. That will stay in the budget no matter what. This school board has made a commitment to ELL students. So I just want everybody to be aware of that.
Thank you. Councilor Joy.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Listening to everyone, we're all looking and going into the right direction, and that's to move the city forward, both internally, infrastructure-wise, as well as education. We're going to have a very difficult time with both budgets. I think the most difficult aspect is that how do we educate and inform our citizens as to the needs that we require to bring us just to the level of medium function for both the city and the school. So I guess that's a thought that I'd like to leave everybody with is how do we do that? Do we try to get a group from both sides? Do we try to involve our workers, our teachers, to try to help us educate our citizens as to the needs? I think that's going to be the greatest goal, actually, especially if we're going to go, or the school committee is going to go in front of the citizens in a referendum. We want to make sure we're on the right path to see that our students are taken care of, as well as the infrastructure of our city, meeting police, fire, public works, and staff as well. So thank you. I appreciate the time.
Allison, you're all set if you want to go.
Good evening. My name's Allison Litton. I am most importantly a parent of 2 LPS students. I am also a family engagement coordinator at Connors Elementary, and I represent the Lewiston Education Association as their current president. I represent about 850 members of our bargaining units, and tonight has been extremely hard to stomach. I've heard the word come up quite a few times, disheartened. And I think that hits the nail on the head. Education is an investment. I haven't heard that. I feel like priorities are a very important thing. And I understand that this year is a struggle. It's been a struggle for all of us, and it will continue to be, because this is something that we have to work our way out of. But cutting funding for our students, for our schools, is not going to be the way to do that. You are deepening a pit that we have lived in for years, that we finally see a little bit of light that we can climb out of. And now we're being told no. We're being told that funding that has gone to the school department should also be considered to cut taxes. There is funding that's going to the city. I'm looking forward to hearing about how that will be spent, what that will be spent on. And I do understand that each side and every person on here is coming to this conversation tonight with their interests and how things need to play out. But I just hope you can remember through all of this that our future is sitting in our schools. Our future that may not have stable home situations, regardless of what your decision on a budget is sitting in our classrooms. We can provide a stable environment in those schools when we have the resources and the staffing that meets those needs, that is adequate. We're not asking for the moon. We're not asking for the stars. We're simply asking for what is necessary to do our job, to serve our students, and to improve the future of Lewiston. I'm looking forward to hearing some collaborative conversation between all parties, and I'm 100% willing to be involved in that. And I know that our educators are also waiting to be asked. So if there is a need to explain something, please, by all means, reach out. I have listened to every budget discussion. I've been there for the majority of them, and I know that the school committee members that sit before you tonight have made some very hard decisions, and they whittled it down to what was the bare minimum was that we could continue to do what we need to do and what you are tasking our local schools to do. So please give us that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands at this time. I think clearly we have some work to do, but I think at this point I will pass it back over to Chair Parks.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
3 months. So move.
Second.
And a second. Thank you. Oh, so how do I vote with this many people? That just occurred to me now.
I would argue that a motion wouldn't be necessary since this is a workshop.
Oh, okay.
So you may just call it closed.
All right. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your time and your questions and your input.